Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final round of Impromptu. Congratulations to all those who have broken. All of our judges are here, and we will be getting started. I will be your proctor for this round, and I will also be giving you time signals for this round. The judges and the competitors have the option of turning off their cameras to save bandwidth, but that is purely up to them. I will leave my camera on for the entire time so you can see me. For those of you who are going to be watching my time signals, the competitors, this is going to be my 5 all the way down to my 1, and then I will give you 30 seconds, and then I'll give you 5 down. And we will go ahead and begin with our first speaker, which is Kellen Foster. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. 1 moment, please. Time starts now. Thirty seconds used. One minute used. $130 used.
The quote which I chose today was, "Even if we don't have the power to choose where we come from, we can still choose where we go from there," by Stephen Chbosky. Now, to me, this quote means that we have the power among ourselves, despite our upbringings or our starting situation, to make a difference and to bring about greatness that no one may have expected from us. In my talk today, I'll bring up 3 main stories to support this. I will talk about Frida Kahlo. I will talk about a character from popular culture. And then finally, I'll talk about a more serious topic in current events today. But to start, Frida Kahlo was a famous Mexican artist who was famous for painting self-portraits of herself. In her early life, she was born with polio, which caused her to be bedridden in her childhood and made it painful to move. In her adult life, she was struck by a bus. Once again, another major setback in her life. By all accounts, that should have been enough for someone to tap out and say, that I have suffered enough abuse in this world. There's nothing more for me to do. But instead, she used that as a conduit to put that energy into her paintings and express her pain as beautiful art that is still expressed to this day. Now, my second example comes from the movie Star Wars. Many of us are familiar with it. Luke Skywalker, the main character, is born on the dingy backwater desert world of Tatooine, bound to go nowhere, and all of his friends have already left home. And yet, one day, he gets a calling from Obi-Wan Kenobi and Princess Leia to go out into the stars and cause some good. And from there, upon leaving his home planet, he became a Jedi Knight and saved the universe from disaster. Finally, like I said before, this next topic is going to be a little more serious. The war in Ukraine continues to rage on to this day. And as we speak, citizens are being bombed out of their homes, and millions are either forced to leave the country or are forced underground into bunkers, into subways, into basements. It's a tragic and morbid time for these people. But we've seen videos released to the public which have shown Ukrainian citizens as explosions ring out above their heads. They are singing to each other, celebrating birthdays of loved ones, chasing dogs around their shelters, doing anything they can to make the most and to provide levity in such a dire situation. While this may not be them leaving a physical place per se, they are coming from a dark environment of being invaded and bombed. But where they chose to go from there was to keep their spirit and keep their levity. Now, the main thing that we've seen today is based on the quote, even if we don't have the power to choose where we come from, we can still choose where to go from there, is that your start point does not determine your end point. Whether you are a Mexican artist who, despite your injuries, you persevere and use that to channel your passion for art. Whether you are born on some backwater world that no one cares about, only to show everybody what you're capable of and to save the universe. Or if you're in a bunker right now with bombs destroying your home and you deciding that instead of giving up hope, you'll turn to laughter and song and camaraderie to try to fight through the evil above you. That on its own is what signifies that your start point never determines your end point. Thank you.
Thank you. Judges, let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Mark's ready.
I'm ready.
What was the time, Dewey?
The time was 6:46.
Thank you.
I think you're still on mute, and I'm ready too. Sorry about that.
Hello, Alex. Sorry. Hello. You ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. One moment, please.
Okay.
Time starts.
Okay.
Thirty seconds used. One minute used. $130 used.
Can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
You'll have to start over if you don't mind.
In life, we'll experience a lot of failure. And what we do with this failure cannot define us, because when we fail, we can't be brought to our knees and we can't be discouraged. We have to be able to have the courage to achieve our dreams, and that means accepting failure as a possibility. And the only way that we truly fail is if we give up. Today, I was given the quotation, "It is impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you may as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default." I'll begin by defining this quotation, then I'll give you my opinion about my definition. Finally, I'll provide you 3 examples that prove my opinion about my definition of the quotation to be true. Now, I believe today's quotation is trying to tell us that in order to live a fulfilling life, we need to be ambitious enough to strive for our dreams. But when we do strive for these dreams, we have to keep in the back of our minds that failure is a very likely outcome. But when we do fail, we can't let that define us, and we must get back up and strive again and again and again. This mindset is the best mindset to have, and 3 stories to prove this is the story of 5'3" Muggsy Bogues, the story of Jonathan D'Amico, and the story of David Goggins. I'll begin by telling you the story of 5'3" Muggsy Bogues, then I'll relate it back to why my opinion about my definition of the quotation is true. Now, standing at 5'3" puts you at a very short stature. The average male height in the US is 5'10". Muggsy Bogues, standing at 5'3", was a short man. But what if I told you that Muggsy Bogues played in the NBA? What if I told you that Muggsy Bogues played basketball at the highest level of competition against guys who are 7 feet tall and 300 pounds like Shaquille O'Neal? You'd probably think that I was lying, but that's not the case at all. Muggsy Bogues adopted this mindset of, I'm going to set my dream of becoming an NBA basketball player. I know that I will fail along the way, but it's worth pursuing because that's what I'll define my life by. I'll keep striving to become an NBA player, and I won't be defined by my failures. Now, this is ultimately what allowed Muggsy Bogues to make and thrive in the NBA. Next, I'll tell you the story of Jonathan D'Amico. Then again, I'll relate it back to why we should all adopt a resilient mindset and not let our failures define us. The story of Jonathan D'Amico is about a high schooler, and you see, he notices a problem that's very prevalent in the student body, not only in his school, but across the nation. These backpacks are just filled with heavy textbooks that diminish the posture of students. And so, as an aspiring entrepreneur, Jonathan D'Amico drops out of high school and founded his own backpack company called Prova Backpacks. Now, of course, Jonathan D'Amico understood that this was a super aspiration and that he would accomplish failures along the way. But he knew that he could not live a life so cautiously, that he had to seize every single moment and seize all opportunities. And this is ultimately what led to Prova Backpacks being a profitable and successful company. Finally, I'll tell you the story of David Goggins, and then again, I'll relate it back to why it's so important to have a resilient mindset. Now, David Goggins was raised in a household by an abusive father and an alcoholic mother. By the time he was 18 years old, he lived by himself in a trailer park home, and he had no real trajectory in his life. However, one night, he's watching a Navy SEAL documentary, and something inside him sparks. He's inspired by the way of the SEALs, their diligence and their dedication, and most of all, their just unwillingness to give up. Now, David Goggins was obese at the time, so when he went to the registration site for the Navy SEAL registrations, he was told that he had to lose 50 pounds just to meet the weight quota. Of course, David Goggins did that. Then he entered Navy SEAL training, Hell Week, which is notoriously one of the hardest training camps in the world. He fails the first time, but not being defined by his failures, he tries again. The second time, he injures his ankle and fails again. Of course, he goes at it for a third time and finally passes Hell Week. He doesn't let his failures define him. He's willing to fail as many times as it takes for him to truly accomplish his goals. Now, it's so important that we adopt this mindset because if David Goggins was a quitter, he would not be an inspirational figure to people all across the world. Today, I was given the quotation, "It is impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well have not have lived." It tells us that we should not be defined by our failures and strive for more. Thank you.
Thank you. Judges, let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Mark's ready. What was the time on that, Dewey? Sorry.
He started a little bit late, but it was 7:08. So
Okay, thank you.
give you a few seconds.
Ready.
All right. Thank you. Okay. I believe our next speaker is Johnny. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. One moment, please. Time starts now. Thirty seconds used. One minute used.
In many cultures, the number 13 is seen as unlucky, but in Mexican culture, it's the number 41. It is seen as so unlucky that it's removed from hotel rooms and even military battalions. This is due to an event known as La Baile de la 41, or for you non-Spanish speakers, the Dance of the 41. This was a secret event held during the early 20th century by queer individuals, where one half of the room dressed up as women and the other half as their male counterparts. However, the political climate in Mexico at the time was not for queer expression, particularly since it went against their Latino machismo. Thus, when the police found out that they were having such an event, they forced the individuals into the streets and forced them to sweep with brooms. To which one of the patrons replied, "Si entendiste como me siento en este vestido, entonces tú te lo pones también." Meaning, if you knew what I felt like in this dress, you would wear it too. This notion of breaking out of our shells and being our truest selves really brings forward the idea that we must continue to move forward. And it's this expression that these individuals brought forward that expressed this livelihood. Which brings us to today's quotation. Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. And we can see this further by analyzing first the problems within our country, particularly those that involve discrimination. Second, how to create our own spaces within discriminatory policies. And lastly, the concept of changing our perspectives, both theoretically and practical. And furthermore, I agree with this quotation because sometimes we deal with tragedies, but when we use something positive amongst those tragedies, we're able to move forward with our lives and create positive change. So when we think about the problems within our society, particularly those that involve discriminatory policies, we have to consider making change. And this is exactly what three individuals thought out when they decided to disrupt the political and social climate of New York City. So these three men walked into a bar known as Julius, known for its cozy tavern and warm kitchen, walked up to the bartender, proclaimed that they were gay, and were promptly denied service. This sparked the gay sipping movements in the 1966, where these individuals tried to unveil the veiled discriminatory policies toward LGBTQ plus members and bring forth change. So along with the Machine Society, they managed to have more support and more individuals started to go into different bars and proclaim they were gay, ultimately leading to the Stonewall riots in 1969, one of the pinnacle movements of the LGBTQ plus community. And although we still are dealing with triumphant discrimination, they still managed to hold themselves true. And this is exactly what Dr. Seuss was saying. Don't cry. Make something of it. Now that we examine the problems within our society, let us examine more upon how we can make our own spaces in a society that's not so welcoming. And we see this in the Californian housing market. Now, they are known for the discriminatory policies, particularly those that only fit within the nuclear family system. Thus, Emily Blake, who was recently divorced and also a single mother, was looking for a new place to live for herself and her child, but kept being rejected in her applications. Thus, she decided it was time to take matters into her own hands. So along with other single mothers in California, they banded together and created a living space known as a commune, where they worked together to raise their children and spite the Californian housing market. So they didn't cry over being rejected. They found a solution and found something that even worked better for them. So now we take that into consideration. Let us talk about the principles of perspective, particularly what it means to change it. Rhetorician and disclosure scholar Lawrence Perley explains in his 2016 book, partial points of views restrict the possibility of meaning for a narrowest audience by disclosing what audiences should value. So ultimately, what individuals are fed are the type of information they're willing to inspire to. And we can see this more with the environmentalist channel Discovery, where they made a comparison during Shark Week to apply this theory, sharks versus vending machines. So it turns out that vending machines are twice as likely to kill you than sharks are. And this was an important comparison because in face value, sharks are typically seen as dangerous, but are vital to ocean ecosystems, particularly to reduce overpopulation. And seeing them as scary causes a problem within those ecosystems because it's not at face value. So when we take that into consideration, we can move away from those perspectives and see that. So when Dr. Seuss was saying, don't cry, It was to refurbish that. So now we take that into consideration. Let us continue the words that Dr. Seuss was suggesting, which is don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. And I agree with this quotation on the notion that one, we have to break out of the discrimination within our society, create our own spaces, and change our perspectives. And as we've seen in the dance of the 41, these individuals didn't cry. They created their own spaces. And now we see LGBTQ individuals in all sorts of places, not only clubs, homes, works, but even places as inclusive as the speech community. People like me.
Thank you. Judges, the time was 6:56. Please let me know when you're ready.
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 Before we get started, I have a major question.
Yes.
After a source is used in a round, it is not allowed to be used in the next round, correct?
It shouldn't be. That's one of the constraints. It shouldn't be used over and over. Yes.
Understood. I would just like to make a note that multiple competitors have used sources in prior rounds that they are in this round. And I guess I can have a conversation with the judge about that after, if that's an opportunity.
I do want to make a note. If they are using it differently, that is completely okay. However, if you're noticing that the word for word is there or that the exact interpretation is there, that's when it becomes a problem. But if they have the same examples but used in a different way that's completely unique round per round, that is completely okay.
Yeah, I would say the intro was almost identical for one case, and the phrasing was almost identical in both cases. But I would like to continue with competition, and if I have an opportunity to discuss this off the live stream, as we are live streaming right now.
Right. Certainly. Are you
Ready
ready?
when everyone is.
Okay. One moment. Time starts now. Thirty seconds used. One minute used.
When food is not available, plants have adapted and grown into their environment. Some have grown to become carnivorous when the soil is lacking of nutrients. And an excellent example of this is Nepenthes lowii, the pitcher plant. A plant formed in the shape of a pitcher with a hole on the top, ribs around the ring, and a slick enzyme that attracts insects, rats, and even birds to come and eat this delicious substance. What these animals and insects do not know is that inside of this plant is a digestive fluid, and as they come to eat this delicious serum at the top, they slide and fall into the acid. Some plants have even adapted to have an additional section on the top that curves above with a very delicious nectar that some rats come along to eat. And these rats are also unknowing that it has a substance that makes them poop much easier. And as they stand on top of the pitcher and eat the nectar, their poop falls into the pitcher. In this aspect, life is not fair for these pitcher plants. They have to do everything they can to survive, but they make it happen. And this brings me to my quotation today. Life is never fair, and perhaps it is a good thing for most of us that it is not. And I interpret this quotation to mean that life is difficult, but the best things come from overcoming that strife. I agree with this interpretation and quotation. And to demonstrate this to you today, we will first talk about Justin Schmidt, the insect studier who reviews pain like a sommelier. Alex Honnold, the individual that climbed all of El Capitan without a single rope. And lastly, Gaston Louis Vuitton, the grandson of Louis Vuitton. First, we'll get into Justin Schmidt. Schmidt is the innovator of the Schmidt pain scale, a very useful tool for entomologists all across the world. He noticed that there was no rating scale for pain in general, so he succumbed himself to stings over 1,000 times. This is pain, and this is very difficult for Justin Schmidt, but he used this to create something that would innovate the entire entomology space. He would describe number 1 sting on a scale of 1 to 4 to be a common B, but the 4, the bullet ant, stinging, hot, burning pain, like having a nail struck into the bottom of your foot as you're stepping onto hot coals. Through overcoming strife, it wasn't necessarily fair that he had to endure this pain, but what he made through it was truly significant. And now that we've talked about Justin Schmidt, the entomologist that reviews pain like a sommelier, next we're going to talk about Alex Honnold, a rock climber who climbed all of El Capitan in something that is referred to as a free solo. Doing so without any ropes or any attachments, it really wasn't fair for Alex. It was in a position where it was life or death, but he took this as an opportunity to strive to his highest opportunity, creating a documentary on being the only individual to ever climb the 400 feet of El Capitan completely solo. And it's an excellent opportunity to demonstrate that there is going to be difficulty, but that is our opportunity to stand to our highest peak. Now that we've talked about Justin Schmidt, the entomologist, and Alex Honnold, the rock climber, finally, we're going to talk about Gaston Louis Vuitton, the grandson of Louis Vuitton. Louis did a lot to popularize the brand, but no one did more than Gaston. He would take the reins of the organization and he would pioneer it, giving an opportunity to take a brand that was already established and do something more difficult and bigger with it. That is a huge challenge to face when you're at the realms of such a gigantic brand. He would partner with major brands such as Jeff Koons and start major collaborations with individuals like Takeshi Murakami, which would completely innovate collaborations for the fashion world. Beyond this, he would extend Louis Vuitton to a brand of LVMH, partnering with Monet Hennessy, eventually creating the largest and most profitable brand in the world. In the process, acquiring brands like Dior, like YSL, and creating the largest fashion conglomerate in the world. Through taking a difficult situation in that it is difficult to overcome what your family prior had done, he created something even bigger. And this all brings me back to my quotation today, that life is never fair, and perhaps it is a good thing for most of it that it is not, by Oscar Wilde. And I interpreted this quotation to mean that life will be difficult at times, but in overcoming that difficulty, we reach our greatest heights in life. To connect this back to our main points, we talked about Justin Schmidt, the insect pain sommelier, Alex Honnold, the free soloist, and Gaston Louis Vuitton. And to connect this back to Nepenthes Lolii, when life doesn't give you the opportunities, sometimes you have to do the most difficult things, even if that means literally eating poop to get yourself by.
Thank you. Judges, the time was 6:58.
Mark's ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right. Thank you. Hello, Hannah. I will go get your quotations now.
Perfect. Thank you.
One moment. Time starts now. Thirty seconds used. One minute used. $130 used.
When I was in 5th grade, my class took a field trip to my local university's basketball stadium, where we saw a women's basketball game and got to participate in an activity in the middle of the game. For the activity, one student got to take a shot, and my 5th grade teacher came up to me, standing at, I'm gonna say 4'3", with a basketball and said, "Your turn." I was baffled. Why would he choose me, the worst basketball player I knew, to take a shot? Now you might think I went up there and crushed it, but no, that ball was nowhere near the net. This reminded me of today's quotation by Charles Darwin, but I am very poorly today and very stupid, and I hate everybody and everything. One lives only to make blunders. I interpret this quotation to mean that life is full of mistakes that make our purpose basically non-existent, and I disagree. In fact, I think one makes blunders to live. In other words, I argue that mistakes are the most important part of learning and growth. We can see this in 3 main ways today. First, by thinking about the poetry of Andrea Gibson and her work on depression. Next, by looking at the way that Russian Ark, and specifically a mistake in the film, is most memorable to viewers today. And finally, by thinking about the blunders made by politicians in the current era and how they've sparked activism among today's youth. starting with an understanding of the poetry of Andrea Gibson, one of my favorite poets. They write about an extremely intense experience in which they are experiencing extreme depression and are almost ready to commit suicide before they see someone else in crisis and decide their purpose is to help another person. Now, I'm not here to tell you that depression or any manifestation of it is a mistake, but instead to say that when we change our mind, sometimes it facilitates human connection in a way we never could have foreseen. Think about a time when you were feeling down, but a friend called you for help and suddenly you were out of the house buying groceries, picking them up because their ride bailed on them, or cheering them up and cheering yourself up in the process. When we look to this poem where she talks about being on a cliff, looking across and seeing someone else in crisis, and then leaving that cliffside, deciding to live for someone else. This is an example of how changing your mind, deciding you've made a mistake, proves the purpose of life itself. Next, we can look to the example of how mistakes made in the film Russian Ark are the most memorable part of the film. Now, Russian Ark is a 90-minute film in a single shot, which covers 300 years of Russian history. And the filmmaker, or the director rather, famously was perfectionistic about every shot, doing many takes, as many as it took to get the film perfect. But there was a blunder. Journalist Jonathan Goldstein examines the fact that in one scene of the single 90-minute shot, an orchestra player looks up at the camera while all the rest look forward at their stands. Now, when interviewed about this moment, the director of the film refuses to acknowledge it, and in fact says he has no memory at all of anyone spiking the lens or looking up. But when we talk about the film today, Goldstein reflects in an episode of the podcast Heavyweight that this is the most significant shot in the whole film. And sometimes imperfection or mistakes or blunders lead us to talk about the beauty and humanity in creations of art. In other words, when we look into that violin player's eyes, we see the humanity behind the film. Blunders give life to art. Finally, we can look to the way that the blunders of our politicians are a critical spark for activism. Take, for example, the politicians in Congress today who continue to be funded by big oil. This was one of the major motivators for the formation of youth organization, the Sunrise Movement, which still works to this day to get money out of politics and advocate for climate reform from the grassroots. This would not be possible without what messaging experts call an antagonist, or in simple terms, a bad guy, upon whom to place blame and spark activist courage among young people. So, did I make the shot? No. But every time I play basketball, I think about that moment. Because when I'm shooting hoops with my friends or just messing around by myself, I notice that the most significant learning opportunities are those when I do not make the shot. In other words, do blunders color life? Yes, but only insofar as they teach us why it's worth living. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The time was 6:47. Judges, let me know when you are ready.
Ready.
I'm ready.
Ready.
Mark, ready.
All right. Christina, are you here? I am not seeing Christina Peterson. There she is. Christina?
Her Wi-Fi bar looks like it's grayed out, so she might be having connection issues.
Okay. We will go ahead and wait for her to come back in, but it is Christina's turn. I believe that we wait, what is it, 2 to 3 minutes? 3 minutes for her to come back? Christina, are you back?
Yeah, can you all see okay now?
Yes, I can.
That was it seems like right as soon as I went to unmute myself, it like automatically muted it and then kicked me out. So I apologize.
Okay. All right. You may be having a little bit of a problem, and if you do, we'll just stop time and let you come right back in. But I'll go get your quotations now.
Okay.
Time starts now.
I haven't received any quotations.
There we go. I just started it. There you go.
Oh, cool.
"30 seconds used." "1 minute used."
A pair of high-waisted aqua color leggings. This is what sparked an unprecedented amount of likes on a recent post by Gymshark on Instagram. Here, body confidence influencer Nellie London posted 2 pictures. One posed and flexed in the new leggings, and the other with the leggings rolled below her stomach. Now, this post was completely unparalleled since Gymshark traditionally only posts pictures of fitness athletes and bodybuilders with practically no body fat. And while this transition to body acceptance is crucial to allowing women to feel confident in their own skin, we have yet to see the same for men. As we can see, women are more readily accepted for the way their body looks, whereas men are not easily afforded that same opportunity. Gymshark has since recruited several plus-size female models and athletes, but are leveling that they need to look like Chris Bumstead in order to be accepted. It's this idea of constantly blaming society or external factors for our misfortunes that leads me to the quotation I received. "I haven't had a very good day. I think I might still be hungover and everyone's dead and my beer's gone," by Holly Black. The way I interpreted this quotation is that there will always be something else to blame for our misfortunes. However, I strongly disagree, because what Holly Black is indicating is that we'll always have that one other factor to say, oh, this is why I'm having a bad day. However, I think we should be accountable in saying that it is normally our own actions that determine those misfortunes. But to further explain why I disagree, we will be applying this idea to 3 additional examples. The first being a cultural philosophical theory, the second being a woman who inspired a Disney movie, and finally the third being a princess. But first, let's take a look at cultural ethical relativism, which is the view that justifies the members of a society believing in ethical rule and acting accordingly, because it is accepted in that society. Here we can see different cultures accepting different ideals. For example, we can apply this theory to the Inuit tribe. This tribe permitted infanticide, which is the killing of children of less than a year of age. However, this was practiced way more on girls than on boys, because girls were considered a waste of resources. Because after all, boys would grow up to be hunters, support their parents later on, and overall be considered a better resource. Here we can see that this seems absurd right off the bat compared to the US, where we can see that murder is considered a cultural norm in one society,
and considered an undoable act in another. Here, once again, we can see that people tend to revert to blaming society for what their culture does wrong. However, I believe that we must stand up and act in order to make true potential change, rather than blaming it on someone else. So, once again, applying this to the quotation I got, we won't always have something else to fall back on in blaming our misfortunes, but rather we need to be accountable. However, this quotation doesn't just function on the philosophical theory level, because we can also see it live through my next example of Edith Macefield. Now, in 2006, a new construction project promised a brand new shopping center in Seattle. But it also meant that a number of buildings would have to be demolished to make way for the new building. But despite the pressure, Edith Macefield decided to not give in. We can see that most residents accepted the $1 million offer, but not Edith Macefield. Now, the media portrayed this story as some David versus Goliath battle against corporate America. But she never gave in to selling her home despite the pressure. The mall was actually built right around her house, just feet from it on either side. And it was later determined that this house was the inspiration for the Disney movie Up, in which Carl didn't want to sell his house either, because it had sentimental value that no amount of money could replace. Applying this to the cultural ethical relativism theory, we can see that we can't always blame society for our misfortunes, even though we know that they're doing something wrong. And secondly, applying it to Holly Block's quotation, we can see that Edith Macefield arguably could have blamed this on the builders, but rather she decided to instead take accountability and create reform on a personal level. And in the same way that Edith Macefield did this, we can see that Princess Diana did a very similar thing. In 1991, Prince Harry's school decided to celebrate Mother's Day with a running competition. Traditionally, mothers would compete with their children by running the second half of the relay. But Harry was the prince. Diana was the princess. She couldn't compete because, one, why would she want to? And two, because she was wearing a skirt. No one even thought to ask if she liked to participate. However, she did. She broke royal rules to allow Harry the chance to be on the same level with the rest of his schoolmates and be included rather than excluded. Applying this to the theory, we can see that she had many opportunities to do otherwise and follow suit of what the school's rules were, but rather she didn't. And applying it to the quotation, we can see that she didn't blame other people for making those rules, but rather decided to step in and make change herself. So in turn, these three examples of cultural ethical relativism, Edith Macefield, and Princess Diana cause us to disagree with the quotation. I haven't had a very good day. I think I might still be hungover and everyone's dead and my beer's gone, by Holly Block. And what she was saying is that we always have something else to blame. However, we saw this to be untrue with Gymshark.
Thank you. The time was 7 minutes, 7:01. All right, everyone, congratulations on making it to the final round of Impromptu. Thank you all very much for attending.
Well done, everybody.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good job, everybody.
Thank you all for judging.
Thank you for the opportunity to compete on a national level. It's truly an honor. Dewey, would you have the time for me to discuss my...
We're in live stream right now, and I'm not sure what we need to do about this.
Could we maybe go into the help room and talk about it?
Yes, I think that's good. We will go ahead and adjourn here. Thank
Me
you.
too.